God evening to you. Thank you so very much for joining us here on WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, but now network, ladies and gentlemen. This is the People's Choice, and I'm your host, Joe Flint, all one word, like a tribe called Quest. Listen, let me put this out here real quickly because I have a bad habit of just jumping in and forgetting to say that the views and the opinions are of Joe Flint and not of WCEG. Please understand that I have my own mind and my own attitude, and I don't want you all to associate my words with WCEG Network. But you can follow us on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook. You can like us on Twitter. You can like us on Instagram. You can follow us on every streaming platform that is there, as well as every social media platform that is out there. We are live and in charge. And again, welcome to this edition to the People's Choice. Tonight, I want to talk to you for just a little while about something that is near and dear to my heart because of one of the leaders that I learned so much from. I want to dedicate tonight's show, in which I've never done that before, but I want to dedicate it to the late Reverend Love, Albert E. Love, one of the greatest gentlemen, one of the greatest ministers, one of the greatest social justice, civil rights justice individuals I had ever met in my lifetime. And if you have been following us for long enough, you know that he had been on my show several times. Reverend Albert E. Love is truly missed. But I want to dedicate tonight's show to him because it was because of him that I actually started making this journey down to Selma, Alabama, to participate in the commemorative march of Bloody Sunday. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this Sunday, March 9th, will be the 60th anniversary, the 60th commemoration of what happened on that tragic day. I believe it was March 7th of 1965. And if I'm wrong, please charge it to my head and not my heart. But I believe it was on March 7th, 1965 when it happened. But that was a time in which we, as African Americans, as Black and brown, or whatever you want to call yourself, I will be the first to tell you that I am truly an American. I was born here. But during this time of social uprise and change and civil rights, we had to do something to get rid of all of the poll taxes and the things that were keeping us from being able to just exercise our God-given right, but also our constitutional right to vote in these United States. And so I'm excited as we are going to make this journey, as we've done for so many years now, down to Selma to participate in now the 60th commemorative anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Last year, when we went, we had the opportunity to see then, now, former President Joe Biden, and we had the chance to hear from now, then, and now former Vice President Kamala Harris. I got a chance to meet with Merrick Garland, who I think at the time was the Attorney General of the United States, and so many other people. And over the years, I've gotten a chance to just meet, as I was looking through my Google photos earlier, I got a chance to see that I talked with Dana Bash from, I believe it was in CNN, or I can't remember what news affiliate she was a part of, but Mr. Charles Steele and so many other individuals who have always come down to be a part of this celebration, because that's what it really is. Although the day was an awful day in history, it is a celebration of what took place in order to get us to this place. Now, is there still a ways to go? Absolutely. Is there still work to do? Absolutely. But we have come a long way. So let me give you some background. If you're familiar at all with civil rights leaders and activists, and some would call them lieutenants in the ML King circle, there was a guy by the name of C.T. Vivian who died just a few years ago during COVID. And Reverend Vivian led a march. It was back in 1965 on February 18th to the courthouse in Marion, the county seat of Perry County, but Marion, Alabama, to protest the arrest of Reverend James Orange. Now, if you are from Atlanta, then you know who Reverend James Orange is. Wonderful guy, always called everybody leader. The state officials had received orders to target Reverend Vivian, and a line of Alabama state troopers waited to the march waited for the marchers in Perry County Courthouse. Officials turned out, and there was a whole bunch of issues. They turned the lights out, and it just so happened that there was a young protester by the name of Jimmy Lee Jackson, who he and his family got out of their cars and tried to escape or tried to get away from what was happening. And one of the state troopers, I believe his name was Fowler, followed them and shot him and made the statement that he thought that he was reaching for his gun. And if you did not know, this is really how the march to Selma, from Selma to Montgomery, got started. And the rest is history, if you will. Now, there were 3 attempts to make this march happen, or 3 times this march happened. The original one took place on March 7th. Boynton, I believe her name was Amelia Boynton, was one of the ladies that was there. If you watch the news at any given time over the past maybe 10 years, you would know that she was there when President Obama crossed the bridge, and she was one of the original foot soldiers. But there was also, we know him as the boy from Troy, Congressman John Lewis, but at that time he was a part of SNCC, and also an Atlanta native or an Atlanta boy. That would be, oh my God, is what I can't call his name now. Jose Williams, excuse me. Forgive me for messing that up. But Jose Williams, again, still the only elected official I know who got elected to city council while in jail still, unbought and unbossed. But ladies and gentlemen, on that day, March 7th, they attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge there in Selma, Alabama, on the way to Montgomery to demand that, if you will, all of the poll taxes and all of the other things be taken away to allow us the simple right to vote. Now, isn't it amazing that something so small but so significant was trying to be taken away from the smallest group of people in the U.S.? Well, at the time, we weren't the smallest group, but we still were not the majority. We were then the minority, and we have continued to be the minority. But because of the power of the vote, and because how the vote can change the trajectory of not only a community, not only a state, not only a city, a town, a state, but also a nation. If you know anything about voting, you know that it has the power to move and remove people. In the beginning, I mentioned to you that I was dedicating the show to Reverend Albert Love, because in my time of working with the NAACP and working in just social justice, Reverend Love always continued to school and educate us, any and everyone who he had a chance to, on the significance of voting, and tried to make it a very easy and simple thing for us to be able to register and to inform everybody about voting. One thing that I always remember in one of the interviews that I had with him is that he said to me, he said, Joe, the difference between you and I and then everybody else is that you and I have the freedom or the time to focus on this kind of stuff, but everybody else doesn't. So they go to work, they leave work, they go and pick up their children, they go get groceries, they go home. This type of thing is not what's always on their mind. Voting is not always on their mind. Registering is not always on their mind. So we have to make it simple and make it easy for them to be able to do it, so that when the time comes that they can easily be registered and easily go down to the precinct to vote. Reverend Love was always trying to think innovative. He also said something to me, which also is part of why I think Bloody Sunday and the commemorative march is so important. Once I had a voter registration, a rally, if you will, and he was one of my keynote speakers when I was a part of the NAACP. And Reverend Love said that the problem with voter apathy is not that people don't care about voting, but it's that when we, and he was talking about his generation, when we got the right, when we secured the right, we did not care to share, or we did not emphasize just how important it was for our children to do so. So he said something along the lines as, we got it and we felt like we always had it. And so because of that, the voter apathy began to roll on and to grow with each and every passing generation, because at this point we felt like we secured it and there was nothing else that we need to do. But there's always, ladies and gentlemen, please hear me when I say there's always a fight for social justice. Now, I'm not talking about social justice based on sexual preference or a religious preference or anything like that, but I'm just talking about the natural, the constitutional rights, excuse me, that we are given as citizens of these United States. Now, all of those other areas that I mentioned have their own, fight, their own message. But when it comes to just the simplicity of being able to vote, when it comes to the simplicity of being able to have access to education and everything else that our country has afforded us or has outlined in our Constitution, then there should always be a fight. And so on that first march, it is called Bloody Sunday because Bull Connor and all of his state troopers, although they had been ordered to stand down on the first march, they had not been ordered to stand down, but they knew what was happening. And they knew that if these foot soldiers, if these men and women had crossed over to Edmund Pettus Bridge or crossed the other side, they were going to create a precedence that had not been done before and get all the way over to Montgomery. It was not enough that just 10 years before the Montgomery boycott, and here y'all, and I hate to say it, but basically I'm sure Bull Connor was saying, here you Negroes come again, trying to start some other mess. 10 years ago, y'all created some mess. Now here y'all come again with some more stuff. And so he wanted to put a stop to it. And unfortunately, a lot of people were hurt and injured dramatically on that day. You've heard in past, and God rest his soul, but you heard Congressman John Lewis talk about how Bull Connor and his dogs and everybody else was out there and how they were beat. And some people jumped over into the river. And if you've ever gone over here, you'll see that it's needless to say, it's not a clean river, but that's a great drop down there. I don't know how deep or how shallow the water is, but that's a great drop from the middle of that bridge down to the river area. And each time that we have gone down here to be a part of this, as I'm crossing the bridge, although it's commemorative, I just imagine what it must have been like that day. I have a picture of some years ago when we went down there that I took with the Alabama State Troopers, because the irony of it is that when this first started, when this was attempting to make the history that it has made, those same troopers would not allow us to cross that bridge. And so when I crossed the bridge and got to the other side and I saw them lined up, I made it a point to take a picture with the Alabama State Troopers, because it was important and it was pivotal for it to be known that the very group that's intended to protect and serve us was the very group that was beating and serving the likelihood of bigotry and segregationists. It's amazing where we've come from, but how far we have to go. So this Sunday, March 9th, we are going to sojourn down to Selma, Alabama, once again, to be a part of now the 60th commemorative march to Selma. And it excites me each and every time, not because I am, some 5-year-old kid, but because I love the history of the struggle that took place for us to get to where we are today. I love the history of the struggle it took for us to arrive in these places. And the truth of the matter is, people don't understand just how important it is for us to know this. And here's the thing, forgive me for that pause, but I just got to note that Jose and John Lewis said they had to cross the bridge because they couldn't jump in because they could not swim. So just imagine the amount of people who were not, and unfortunately, that's kind of a bad part of our culture, but it's not known that Blacks can swim, not all anyway. But the fact that some of them had to endure the beating because they could not swim is even more alarming and makes me even more compelled to continue to make this journey every year that I possibly can. In times that I have not been able to go, I have sent my children on my behalf because I wanted them to know and to see just how important this was. Something that I would like to add is that this was done 3 different times. The one on Sunday, March 7th, and then it was done again, and then I think it was the 25th or 27th of March when the march was actually complete. And the second time, they were about to do it. Dr. King and Coretta and so many other leaders were there, but they end up halting the march because they were now about to get some support from the United States government by sending in the troops. Now, that wonderful governor at the time of Alabama was still not supportive. And so he did not send in his state troopers, and he did not send in anybody else. But the National Guard was called to order by then President Johnson in order for them to be able to make this march. And so while they were waiting on that injunction, that's when they went the third time. And in that third time is where you see the picture of Martin Luther King and Coretta and so many other leaders that are there getting ready to march across the bridge. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've never made this journey, I think it's so important, if for no other reason, for you to understand where we've come from and the struggles in which we still have to go. It's important that you make this journey. Now, every year, you know, I have a van or a Sprinter van or whatever type of vehicle to go down to participate in this commemorative march. And I invite as many people as I can hold to join us. But there are all types of convoys and so many different charter buses and groups that go down on a regular basis to go here. And it is important that we start to realize that when we are participating in something so huge like this, it gives us the opportunity to be a part of something that's bigger than we've ever been a part of before. So it's very important that when we take these types of opportunities to get down to Selma, we should go on a regular basis to be a part of it, because there's nothing more important than watching or being a part of something that we've never experienced, but something that was done for us to be able to be who we are today. Can you imagine what wouldn't be if we were not there? Can you imagine what wouldn't be if people had not taken the time to march for us? Could you imagine where we would not be today if people didn't love us the way that we are being loved now? Although there are still a lot of folks who are creating issues and creating problems and trying to get rid of all the success and all the progress that we've made, we have to remember that there were people who went far and beyond the norm in order for us to be where we are today. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my pleasure over the past few years to be able to participate in such an amazing journey. And each year for me, it gets better and better and better. And each year I get fuller and fuller and fuller, because I always meet individuals who had never gone before. I can remember one of the first times I went, there was a couple, a white couple who I stood next to in front of Brown Chapel. And they told me that they attempted to come down when they were, you know, just young in their age, but their parents would not allow them to go because they knew what had happened in Alabama weeks before, days before, and what was continuing to take place in the South, but they were not allowed to go. So when they became old enough and they were married and they decided that they were going to go down to be a part of it, you have to understand that this might have been a struggle specifically for African Americans, but this was a struggle for America. You know, I serve this great nation. I tell you this all the time. I served this great nation for 8 years in the United States Army, the greatest army in the world, at least when I was there. I can tell you the same thing now. But in that time frame, I saw some of the greatness of America, and I saw some of the pitfalls of America. But in serving this place, I've always come to know that there is a greatness in us that is sometimes being overshadowed by the ignorance of us. And it's not so much that the country as a whole has been ignorant, but it's been the ignorance of people who have had the privilege and the powers to serve this country. And so with that being said, it's even more important that we understand why voters' rights were so important. And there was a speech, and I want to make sure I'm getting the speech correct, and forgive me as I pause for this, but there was a speech because of what had happened that was made by President Lyndon Johnson, and the speech was entitled, let me remember if I can find this. You've probably seen it in any history books or something along the lines of that, but I apologize for not having. I thought I found it earlier, but there was a speech that Lyndon Johnson made that basically pushed and made all the Southerners who were against it to vote for the Civil Rights Act. But in his speech, he basically made it known that America is not a place for this type of hate and bigotry, and that every man should have his or her ability to exercise their right to vote. And President Johnson was able to make that happen through this speech. And what we need to understand, brothers and sisters, is that when we don't give when we don't take the time to read and understand and participate in this type of historical event, we find ourselves repeating these things over and over and over again. And when we don't do it, brothers and sisters, we are going to find ourselves back in these same places because nobody taught us. I was saying to my producer here just a little while ago before I came on the show that there are people, even in my family, but there are people who I encounter every single day who do not know the history of us. There are people who I encounter every single week who are not always aware of some of the things that we had to overcome. Everybody likes to speak and preach and talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom without question definitely deserves the accolades that he has. But what needs to be understood, brothers and sisters, that there is so much more to our history than that of Dr. Martin Luther King. There's so much more to our struggles than Dr. Martin Luther King. There are individuals out there who were gone and who had gone long before him to do things. It should be known that when the Boyce boycott came about, the reason that Martin Luther King ended up being the leader because he was the newest person there, didn't have the history that the rest of them had. So they put him up because he didn't have all of the stuff that everybody else had. Ralph David Abernathy had already been a sugar honey iced tea starter. And so many other people had already done stuff like this before. So part of it, brothers and sisters, is that they had to be careful about who they put up. But there were individuals during King and after King that have always been there to make sure that we are working to ensure that we have the lives that we deserve. Brothers and sisters, Selma is probably one of the greatest things that I've ever done because it allows me the opportunity to see a sea of people who love and support and believe in the democracy that we have, a sea of people who love and support the republic for which we were founded. It is so important that we take this time every year, and I take the time every year to ensure that if not just me, but my children, now I have a grandchild, but that they will be able to participate in these things as well. It's so important that everybody that's around me is able to participate in these types of things, because I extend the invitation all the time. But understand, brothers and sisters, that we have not completely overcome. There is still a lot for us to do. There's still far more places that we must go. There's still a million other things that we must encounter. But more importantly, brothers and sisters, we must take the time to learn our history. And in learning our history, brothers and sisters, we will not be set back 10, 15, 20, 50, even 100 years, because we will know the history that stands before us. But when we ignore our history, when we ignore the struggles, when we ignore the people who gave up everything that they possibly could to get us to where we are today, then we basically spit on them and tell them that what they did was not enough. I know that we encounter a lot of young people now who are not as excited, who don't care as much about what we're doing. But it's so important that we encourage them and educate them on the things that have transpired over the past 50, over the past 100, over the past 250 years that this nation has been in play. Because the more that we ignore our history, the more that people are able to beat us into a new submission. Oh, I almost felt like preaching right then. But when we ignore what we don't know, when we ignore the things that keep us, that brought us, then these are the things that will keep us from being able to be who we are today. And I know I may be talking around and maybe talking, a little too deep, or I don't know, whatever you may be thinking. But the fact of the matter is, Selma is where we are today. Selma is where we have come to today. And believe it or not, we are still fighting for these same rights. Not because people don't know that we deserve it, not because it's already listed in the Constitution, but because there are people in our world and in our society, and specifically in our nation, who feel that their skin color makes them superior, who feel that their privilege makes them superior, who feel that their money and their homes and their communities should not be welcoming people of other skin tones and colors. And I do my very best not to speak ill of our current president. Uh, and I will always try to do my best not to speak ill of him. But one thing that I have to say, and I say this thing about not speaking ill of him, because I don't concern myself with who's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. My faith is rooted in something far greater and deeper than whoever serves this nation. But because I am a citizen of this nation, I am very cautious about what takes place. But let me say this. President Trump, he does his very best to prove that he is not a bigot or things of that nature. And he may very well not be. I cannot say it. But I will say that words matter. I will say that actions matter. And some of the things that he has done and some of the things that he has said and some of the things that are transpiring right now are the very reason why people such as Amelia Boynton, the young man Jesse, people such as Hosea Williams, people such as goodness, I can't remember names now. They're all going away from me. But John Lewis and so many other foot soldiers and C.T. Vivian, so many others who were out there on that bridge that day, who made the sacrifice to ensure that we have a right to vote. It bothers me to see that we are losing this type of support. And it bothers me that our children are growing and not understanding. My son will be joining me on this trip because it's important that he sees this. Generally, he has not been here, but now he has the opportunity to see it this time. And so, brothers and sisters, I didn't want to talk to you very long, but I wanted to educate you and invite you to join us. If you're not doing anything Sunday, half y'all ain't going to church anyway, take the few-hour drive down to Selma, Alabama, and march with us across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. See the historical markers, see the history that took place now 60 years ago. See where we have come and see how far we have to go. I just wanted to come on for a short moment just to talk to you about Selma and the excitement that I have about it. I know I didn't sound excited, but I assure you it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. We visit the Legacy Museum. We stop by the Viola Luozo site. We see so many things. And listen, the following weekend, the weekend of the 15th, myself and 8 other individuals are going to go down and run the 51 miles of Selma to Montgomery for the Civil Rights Trail. This is not just something for show. This is something that is for love of country, love of people, and love of social justice. And that's all I have for you today. I didn't want to come on and talk to you all night long, but I just wanted to share with you a little history about Selma and about the importance of ensuring that our history is not erased, but more importantly, about the importance of making sure that our children understand from whence we've come. Because although we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go. Brothers and sisters, don't let the sacrifices of the few thousands that went before us be swept away in the millions who now have access to thousands and millions of followers on social media. I wish that some of these social media's influencers would find themselves in Selma on Sunday. And rather than posting about what you bought and who you're riding with, post about history that made you who you are today. Listen, that's all I have for you this evening. My name is Joe Flint, all one word, like a tribe called Quest. This has been the People's Choice on WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Network, WCEG, the